Grimm's fairy tale, published by Lock&Co.Limited. Limited. So another fairy tale from the Drudge of all work. So there was once a king who had a wife with golden hair. She was so lovely that there was not her equal on earth. One day she fell ill, and feeling sure she would die, she called her husband and said, "If you marry again after I am dead, do not choose anyone as your wife who is not as fair as I am, and who has not golden hair like mine. You must promise me this." After the king had promised, she closed her eyes and died. For a long time the king was inconsolable, and would not hear of choosing another wife. At last his advisers said, "There is no help for it. The king must marry again. We cannot do without a queen." Ambassadors were now dispatched all over the world to look for a bride whose beauty would rival that of the late queen. They could not find anyone who approached her, and even if they had, she would not have the same golden hair. So the ambassadors returned, abandoning the quest as hopeless. The king had a daughter who grew up as beautiful as her dead mother, and who had golden hair like hers. The king looked at her one day and was struck by her extraordinary likeness in every respect to his dead wife. He said to his advisers, "I will marry my daughter because she is the living image of my dead wife, and no one else in the world resembles her." The advisers were horrified and reminded him that God forbade a man to marry his daughter, and that if he committed such a sin, no good would come to the kingdom. The daughter too was alarmed when she heard of her father's resolve, and tried to turn him from it. She said to him, "Before I can comply with your wish, I must have 3 dresses, one gold like the sun, others silver like the moon, and a third shining like the stars. Besides, I must have a cloak made of 1,000 skins put together, and every animal in your kingdom shall contribute to this fur garment." As she said this, she thought, "It is quite impossible that he can ever procure these, and my suggestions will deter him from his purpose." The king, however, issued an order to the most skillful spinning women in his realm to set out to work to spin the dresses, one gold like the sun, another silver like the moon, and third shining like the stars. And the king's huntsmen were commissioned to catch every animal in the kingdom, to take a bit of their skin of each kind and construct the patchwork cloak of 1,000 skins. At length, when all was finished, the king had the cloak spread before him and said, "Tomorrow is the day fixed for the wedding." The princess, seeing there was no hope of changing the king's purpose, determined to fly. In the night, when everyone was asleep, she got up and selected from among her jewels and valuables 3 things: a gold ring, a gold spinning wheel, and a gold hair skin. The dresses, like the sun, moon, and stars, she folded up and laid in a nutshell. She put on the cloak of animal skin and stained her face and hands with walnut juice. Then she commended herself to God and set out. She walked on and on the whole night, till she came to a large wood, and as she was worn out, she sat down in a hollow tree and fell asleep. The sun rose, and still she slept and slept far into the day. Then it happened that the king to whom the wood belonged came to hunt in it. When his hounds came to the tree, they jumped round it and barked. The king said to the huntsmen, "Look and see what wild deer is hidden there." The huntsmen obeyed, and when they came back, said, "There's a marvelous animal in the hollow tree, the like of which we have never seen before. It has a skin composed of 1,000 kinds of fur, and it is lying asleep." The king said, "Catch it alive, bind it to the wagon, and take it home." When the huntsman caught hold of the girl, she awoke in terror and cried out, "I am a poor child, deserted by my father and mother. Have compassion upon me and treat me kindly." They said, "Drudge of all work, you'll do for the scullery and pick up the ashes." So they bound her to the wagon, took her home to the royal castle, and showed her a cupboard under the stairs where there was no daylight, saying, "There, little wild animal, you may dwell and sleep if you like." Then they sent her to the kitchen, where she had to hew wood, draw water, clean grates, sift the ashes, wash the vegetables, disembowel the game, and do all the dirty work and odd jobs. Thus poor Drudge of all work lived a long time in great wretchedness. Alas, poor princess, what a fate! One day there was a great feast in the castle, and she said to the cook, "May I go upstairs and look on for a while? Look on for a little? I will hide behind the door." The cook answered, "Yes, I give you leave, but remember, in half an hour you must be back again to sift the ashes." So the princess took her little oil lamp and went into her cupboard, where she laid aside her fur covering and washed the stain off her hands and face, so that her beauty shone forth in all its radiance. Then she opened the nutshell and drew out the robe that shone like the sun. In it she went upstairs to the party, and every one drew aside to let her pass, for no one recognized her, and all thought she was some strange princess. The king came forward, kissed her hand, and danced with her, thinking he had never before set eyes on so beautiful a creature. When the dance was over, she courtesied, and when the king looked around, she had vanished, no one knew where. The guards in front of the castle were called and questioned, but not one of them had seen her pass. She had run back to her cupboard, hastily taken off her dress, made her hands and face sooty, wrapped herself in the fur mantle again, and was once more drudge of all work. When she went back to her work in the kitchen, the cook said, "Leave the cinders till tomorrow and make the king's soup for me, while I go up and look on for a bit too. But whatever you do, don't let a hair get into the soup, or in future I shall give you no more scraps to eat." The cook departed, and Drudge of all work made the king's soup. It was a bread soup, and she took great pains with it. When it was ready, she went to her cupboard, fetched her gold ring, and laid it in the dish in which the soup was to be served. After the dance was over, the king ordered his soup to be brought, tasted it, and said it was so good that he never remembered to have tasted better. As he came to the bottom of the bowl, he saw the golden ring and could not conceive how it had come there. He ordered the cook to be brought into his presence. The cook was in great fright at his summons and said to the Drudge of all work, "I expect you have let a hair fall into the soup. If you have, I'll give you a hiding." "Who made the soup?" asked the king when the cook stood before him. "I made it," replied the cook. The king, however, said, "That is not true. It was made in a different way and was much better than usual." Then the cook said, "I must confess that it was not I, but the little ragamuffin who made the soup." "Send her to me, then," commanded the king. When Drudge of all work appeared to the king, asked, "Who are you?" She replied, "I am a poor orphan child with neither father nor mother." "What are you doing in the castle?" he questioned again. "Nothing. I am only good for having boots thrown at my head," she answered humbly. "Where did you get the ring that was in my soup?" "The ring? What ring? I know nothing about it." The king, finding he could get nothing out of her, sent her back to the kitchen. Not long afterwards, there was another feast in the castle, and Drudge of all work asked permission of the cook as before to go up and watch the merrymaking. The cook said, "Yes, you can go, but come back in half an hour and make the bread soup the king liked so much." The princess ran off to her cupboard, washed herself quickly, and shook out the robe that was silver like the moon, arrayed herself in it, and went upstairs to the hall room. The king advanced to receive her, expressed his delight at meeting the fair princess again, and they danced together. But immediately the dance was over, she vanished so quickly that the king did not see which direction she had fled in. She popped up into her cupboard, converted herself into a tousled headed little ragamuffin again, and went into the kitchen to cook the bread soup. While the cook was upstairs, she fetched her little gold spinning wheel and placed it in the dish in which the soup was to be served. The soup was taken up to the king, who ate it with relish, saying it was the best he had ever tasted. Again, the cook was sent for. She was obliged to confess as before that not she but Drudge of all had made the soup. Once more Drudge of all work was summoned, but she would say nothing except that boots were thrown at her head and that she knew nothing about gold spinning wheels. The third time the king gave a banquet in his castle, and things happened as they had done on the two previous occasions. The cook said, "You certainly must be a witch, Ragamuffin. Otherwise, how is it that the soup tastes so much better to the king when you make it?" But the girl begged so hard. The girl begged so hard to be allowed to go up and watch the dancing that the cook said she might. This time she put on the dress that shone like the stars. She entered the hall, and the king danced with her and thought she looked lovelier than ever. While they were dancing, the king, unremarked, slipped a ring to his partner's finger and gave orders for the dance to be prolonged. When at last the dance was over, he tried to hold her fast by both hands, but she snatched them away and hurried off so quickly through the crowd that she seemed to vanish before his very eyes. As fast as she could, she ran into her cupboard beneath the stairs, but because she had about absent over half an hour, she had no time to take off the starry dress, but threw her fur cloak over it. And in her haste she forgot to make herself quite sooty, and one finger remained white. Drudge of all work now ran into the kitchen, made the king's bread soup, and when the cook was away looking on at the dance, she laid the golden hare skin in the tureen. The king, when he found it, ordered Drudge of all work to be brought to him. He at once he deducted her white finger and the ring he had put on it during the dance. He caught hold of her hand and held it tight, and when she tried to disengage herself, her fur mantle opened a little in front, and he saw the star robe shining between the folds. Then her golden hair came to view, and it was impossible for her to conceal herself any longer. When she had wiped the cinders and soot from her face, she looked more beautiful than any earthly being. The king said, "Now I will make you my bride, and we will never part again." So they were married and lived happily together till the end of their days. That's what fairy tales are for, like happily ever after.